Sorry about that. Welcome, everyone, to the September 13th, 2021 Board of Health meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chairman, John Beckley. Pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16th, 2021 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 20, until April 1st, 2022. This meeting of the Chatham Board of Health is being conducted in person and via remote for public participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 945-4410 and conference ID number 621-348-126#, or you may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and a simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So I'd like to turn this meeting over to Chairman John Beckley.
Thank you, Judy. I'd like to start by asking that you introduce the gentleman to your left.
So everyone, this is Lucas Amato. He's my new assistant. He's part-time health inspector. Lucas graduated with a public health degree from UMass, and he's been with us for about 2 months. He's been doing a great job really learning all the field work and assisting me wherever I'm needed. So welcome, Lucas.
Welcome, Lucas. Okay, we have an agenda tonight consisting of six items. Let's get started with the first. The first is a real estate inspection variance request and extension of sewer connection order for Ashish Kudari and Jen Eggers at 31 Bayview Street. We have a report. We have in our packets a letter from this gentleman, and we have a memo from Judy, basically laying out the history of this property and a recommendation from Judy that the property be connected, basically that the owners and the purchasers be allowed to continue with the use of the system with the following conditions. The conditions, one being the property must be connected to the municipal sewer within 1 year of transfer of property. Judy, do you want to say anything else about this property? You kind of summarized it in your memo.
We have not yet ordered a connection here. So the previous owner had gotten the extension from the board with the understanding that they would connect once ordered. Now it's being transferred, and the new owners can't get it connected within 90 days. Most of our engineers are 6 months behind schedule for even getting out and doing the engineering. So I think we have a representative here.
Yes.
So
Hi.
maybe Jane would like to speak.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. So essentially the homeowner is just looking for a continuance of the waiver that was issued in September of 2019, stating that they did not have to bring the Title V system up to code because it failed because it was on a cesspool. So in the just about 2 years they've owned it, they've been waiting for the order to go ahead and connect in, and they still have not received that written order. But yet they then have in the interim decided to sell the house, and new buyers are buying the property and closing on September 24th. So, which is, less than 2 weeks away. So the homeowner is really looking for a continuance of that waiver to allow the new buyer to hook up into the sewer system. The pipes are down in the road, but just this property has not received the actual written order to go ahead and connect in.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from board members on this matter? Yes.
Yes.
Carol?
they had been, part of this condition was that they have it pumped every year. And the last time it was pumped was in 2019.
Right.
So if we're going to delay it another year, it could be a year before they get hooked up. Shouldn't they pump the system?
So can I speak to that?
Sure.
So they bought the property and they did, for the whole first year they owned it, first year and a couple months, they did a pretty significant renovation on the property, never were there, never used it. So in the 2 years that they've owned it, they've probably spent about 40 days there. So they did have a septic inspector come out and he said, my gosh, you've barely used the system, you've barely used it. It doesn't make sense to pump it. So it was his recommendation not to pump it just because they had spent so little time there.
That's what I understand from the letter that was sent to us, that it's been very lightly used. And if they're going to connect it in the next year, I don't see why they would have to pump it as long as it's not, becoming a hazard at this time, which it doesn't sound like it is, so.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Ron?
Yes, is it going to be occupied during this time?
During which time? After it conveys, after it
Yes,
sells?
yes.
It's being used as a vacation property, so as a second home, so probably lightly used, I would say, going into the fall, and then more heavily used next summer. But the buyer is completely aware of their responsibility to hook in as soon as possible. She's already looked into getting an engineer to draft a plan to hook in. So, and they're ready to go as soon as the town gives the order.
I don't think they need an order at this point. Now that the property is transferring and the sewer is available, it is available and they can begin the process. So essentially what the board decides here today would constitute an order to connect.
Okay.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Carol about, yeah, it's on, why the condition of a yearly pump and inspection wouldn't remain in effect, because it could be another year before they're actually hooked up. And so they would have skipped a year. And so it doesn't seem so onerous to have them pump and inspect and just keep on that schedule. That's kind of our routine. The other question I had was, it's a sort of a process question. Is this variance given to the property or the current owner or the new owner? How does that work?
I mean, it was given to the last owner who actually purchased it at that point. So it kind of went with the property, but usually when you transfer, it's considered a failed system again, so it has to be addressed. And now that the sewer is available, we would want it to be connected instead
So
of.
would the variance go to the current owner or to the new owner or to
It'll,
the property?
it goes with the property, and that would be the new owner, because they're going to be the owners after transfer. But as far as getting it pumped, I mean, it's a cesspool, so there may not be much in it to pump. I'm not sure if Jane has, she said you had it looked at, if we could possibly get something from an inspector that says,
So I can tell you, can I interject for a second? So the bank, they're getting a mortgage, and Wells Fargo, the bank wanted it inspected just so they knew it was working. So that was done by the buyer just last week. They had an inspection done.
so if they provided us with that inspection, we could see whether it needed to be pumped at this point. It's
Yeah,
cesspool is.
I think that would be a reasonable condition, that we get a copy of the
Right,
inspection report.
and then have it pumped if it's required.
Right.
Right.
If the cesspool is dry and void of any liquids, the pumping, I guess, is moot at that point.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
And so then if we give the variance to the current owner, then it continues to the new owner as far as we're concerned? Yeah, okay.
All right, can I have Ron?
So this system is ready right now to be tied in. Is that what I
Correct.
understand it?
The line is in the street,
So they're all ready as soon as they get an engineer to.
and the buyers are apparently willing and eager to proceed with the formal connection as soon as they get title and can arrange to hire an engineer.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Can I get a motion perhaps with a stipulation on the inspection report being conveyed to Judy for her review.
I'll make a motion that the property at 31 Bayview, that we accept the variance with the condition that they hook up to the sewer when it's available within 1 year, and that the board gets a copy of the inspection report that's been done apparently by the
buyer.
prospective buyer, and that
Right.
it passes as we've been told.
Okay?
When do you want that?
You can email it to me or drop it off anytime this week would be great, if you have a copy of it.
Okay.
Can I get a second from a board member? Second. Ron seconds. Okay, any further discussion? Anybody from the public wish to comment?
I think what you want to do, just for clarity, is you want to extend the existing variance,
Right.
all right? Because there is an existing variance, and it wasn't clear from the way you made your motion that you're
Okay.
extending the existing variance.
All right, so I'll modify the language that we extend the existing variance to the new owner of the property at 31 Bayview.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Variance is granted with that condition. All right. You're good to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's go to item number 2, which is a definitive subdivision plan review for Chatham Productions, LLC, applicant 776 Main Street, Clark Engineering representing. Every Board of Health member got a pretty large packet of information showing how this property is being subdivided. We reviewed this a year ago or so. This was familiar when I looked at it. So this was for the definitive subdivision plan. Is
David Clark is on
Mr.
the
Clark?
line.
Okay, Mr. Clark, you have the floor.
Thank you. David Clark, Clark Engineering, on behalf of the applicant. You did see this, I believe, back in January or February of this year as a preliminary plan. So we're going through the definitive process. So the most significant change from what you saw earlier is that we've reduced the number of lots by 2. So we're only proposing 4 residential lots and then the remaining commercial lot on Route 28. The plans that have been submitted show the full design of the stormwater treatment system, as well as the extension of the municipal sewer into the subdivision. So all 4 lots will be connected to the municipal sewer, and the commercial buildings out on 28 are already connected to the municipal system. So it's pretty straightforward, 4-lot subdivision. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Comments, questions from board members for Mr. Clark?
This Noble, I just had a question for either Judy or Bob. The stormwater report, which is pretty detailed, is that been reviewed by one of you and it's adequate as far as you're concerned?
I've reviewed it. I'm not a stormwater expert. I assumed at some point Bob would be reviewing it. But what I read, it seems adequate, and I can say that the soils there are acceptable for, they perk acceptably for stormwater or sewer or septic, but there's no septic there, it's sewage. So, yeah, I think it looks okay to me.
So the board's review of this tonight has absolutely nothing to do with lot number 1, which is the old theater buildings. That's a totally separate issue that,
I think that's part of the subdivision. Am I correct, David?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But it's already connected to the municipal sewer, so it
Right.
Do we-
has an approved form of wastewater disposal.
But do we have any information on the intended use of Lot 1?
No, we don't.
So the owner is not committing to anything in terms of, bringing back the theater or any of that?
No,
Okay,
no, that's a separate issue from the subdivision process. This is simply carving out 4 new lots at the north portion of the property.
okay. Thank you. Dick,
Just for clarity, can you explain, or Dr. Duncan, explain what the role of the Board of Health is in stormwater runoff details, particularly if it's a lot that's connected to the sewer system?
Sorry. The board's responsibility when you're reviewing subdivision plans is really 2 things. To make sure that the property is adequate for wastewater disposal, which in this case is moot because it's going to be on the sewer, but if it wasn't, you'd have to find that the property has the appropriate soil conditions, doesn't have real high groundwater, all those kinds of things that would prevent septic systems being installed. Similarly, you have to find that the site, the property, is adequate for stormwater disposal. And again, based on soil conditions, wetlands, all those kinds of things, that in your opinion, they can in fact put stormwater systems of appropriate type on the property and not cause any problems either to the environment or any abutting properties. So in other words, their solution couldn't be, well, we're just going to dump it onto our neighbors. You could find that that's not adequate. Or you could find that the parcel is all clay and therefore, you can't put either a septic system or a stormwater system that would function. So that's really, in terms of the subdivision regulations, that's really the extent of your review. Is it adequate for wastewater disposal? Is it adequate for stormwater disposal? And in the absence of any soil conditions or wetland or some other thing that comes up during the review process, I would say in general, most times the Board of Health is going to say, yeah, it's adequate. It may require, some subdivisions may require a little bit more engineering than others. But I can only recall 1 or 2 instances over the years where the Board of Health said, no, for this reason, it's not adequate for either one of those 2.
So we basically then accept the plan provided by the licensed engineer that it's adequate? Because
Yeah.
nobody here has any expertise in knowing what size culvert you need for.
Exactly, but like I say, as long as you don't see something like a test boring that shows you it's 30 feet of solid clay, and you would know enough to say, well, you couldn't cite a septic system in that, and you couldn't cite a stormwater in there because it would never leach out. The design of the system, yes, is up to the engineer. But in terms of, is the site adequate, and that's what the law actually says, the board has to find the site is adequate for wastewater or stormwater disposal.
okay?
I just-
Comments, questions?
One quick kind of a process question again. In the issue, with the sewer hookup, the issue of bedrooms per unit, we usually deal with a Title V. This is a sewer. How does that work?
So the town of Chatham water and sewer regulations basically say that they will only allow the sewage flow on the property that would be approved by the Board of Health under our regulations that existed early, I think it was like 2003 or something before then, which basically says 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet of lot area, plus 1 if you would put in an alternative or you connect a sewer. So these lots will be restricted to that, and that's also reflected in our division of land, which is right from our nitrogen loading regs that say,
The short answer to your question is you can't have anything You can't have more bedrooms on a piece of property on sewer than you could on a septic system.
Correct.
With IA?
Well, if you could get 3 bedrooms and that's all you wanted, with a regular system, you could get 3 bedrooms. If you wanted that 4th bedroom, and it was, say, a 30,000 square foot lot, you'd have to put the IA in through a variance to get that 4th bedroom on a septic system. We reviewed the same thing at the staff level if the property was going on sewer. In our opinion, is there a reasonable expectation that the board would grant a variance for a septic system to give them the 4th bedroom? And if that's the case, then they could get the 4th bedroom on sewer as well.
Okay, so in this subdivision, that process is down the road?
Correct, right. And what will happen is the plans will come into the building department, and I'll review them and make sure that they don't go over what we would allow.
So these lots are like 13,000 square feet. So under that rule, would they be allowed 2 bedrooms max?
Our regulations allow 2 bedrooms on any lot in Chatham, so we would allow 3 bedrooms on this, as long as it's not in a Zone 2 of a public water supply, which this is not. So we could allow 3 bedrooms on sewer on these lots. Because our nitrogen loading regs say that any vacant lot in Chatham is automatically gets 2 bedrooms.
But if it's 10,000
Unless
square
it's in the
feet
zone
per
two.
bedroom, how do we get to the third?
That was a way of grandfathering some, allowing some lots that were grandfathered in to allow them to be able to build a 2-bedroom house on them.
And it was also part of the discussion was, nobody wants a 1-bedroom house. So when the nitrogen loading regulation was passed, it basically said 2 bedrooms on any size parcel by right.
Okay, but this is 13,000, so that's 2.
Yep.
How do we get to the third?
Well, we would allow 2 without an IA septic system.
So they'd have to either add an IA system to get the +1.
Right.
Or they'd have to connect to the sewer to get
Right.
the +1.
Right.
There's no minimum lot size for a house, a new house building in Chatham? You can put it on a 2,000 square foot lot?
Yep. Unless it's in a Zone 2 of a public water supply. If it's in a Zone 2, which is what we had discussed at our last meeting, that overlay map, then they have to meet a stricter standard, which is in Title V, what DEP requires. And if there was a 2,000, they wouldn't even be able to put a 1-bedroom house on it. So the calculation that use, pretty much anything under like 15,000 square feet, you couldn't, even with an IA, I don't think you could put a 2-bedroom house on it in a Zone 2. In a Zone 2. So, but as I said, anything that, any other area of a town, they automatically get 2 bedrooms, and then we would allow the 3rd with connection to sewer or an IA nitrogen-reducing septic system.
So if you had a 6,000 square foot piece of property, you could build a house on that with 3 bedrooms?
Yes.
If you hooked it up to a
I
sewer?
mean, assuming they can meet all the other town requirements as well, zoning, property coverage, all of that, height, everything.
Oh, my goodness.
So the formal request for the number of bedrooms is not being made now, is that correct?
Correct.
Right, no.
Okay.
That's down the road. Any other questions or comments from board members? If not, can I get a motion to approve this application? Motion to approve. Thank you, Ed. Any second? Thank you, Carol. Any further comments from the public on this application before the board votes? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, David. All right, let's go to item number 3 on the agenda, which is another definitive subdivision plan for Alan Peralt applicant address at 79 Forest Beach Road, east southeast representing. So who do we have represent? Is that Thad?
That's Thad.
That's bad. For the record, Thad Eldridge, East Southeast. I have to thank David Clark for paving the way as you've now reviewed your role in the subdivision process. We were before you about a year ago with a preliminary subdivision plan showing 2 lots. They're both larger than the minimum required for the zoning district. The existing house was preserved. It's on a 3-bedroom septic system on a 30,000 square foot lot. And there's a proposed lot that's over 40,000 square feet that will eventually have a 4 or 5 bedroom septic system on it, the house. The soils out here are sand. So they perk well. The groundwater table was monitored or recorded. And that's, and this property is on a large hill, so anything they put in can be well above that groundwater table. And otherwise, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thad, I'm looking at a plot plan and I see, my eye is telling me I'm seeing 2 different ways to get onto the property. One is a driveway easement from the north side, and then there's a new access, if I'm interpreting that right, down, that's noted Pierce Path.
Yes, you are.
Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, so the new lot, which is lot 6, the proposal is to access it from Forest Beach. In order to provide the requisite frontage, we're proposing a stub of a road called Pierce Path coming off of Bobby's Lane. When we first came in for this proposal, we were going to create a road coming off of Forest Beach with a number of waivers to protect the historic dwelling. Shortly after the planning board approved the preliminary, the town planner called with Director of Community Development and DPW Director and said, "We don't like that idea. We'd prefer if you came in from below with the frontage. There's a little bit of road construction that will occur down there, and this will provide a better turnaround near the tennis courts." That's a town-owned property. And so for the greater good, we're proposing that, and they were completely on board with the idea of still accessing the property from above.
So when this house is built, the new house on lot 6, which way would the driveway come in?
Off of Forest Beach, right in front of number 79.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Judy?
Thad, can you, I'm just curious, the water line, it travels from Forest Beach and then across both properties and then down towards Bobby's. Is that the only line? Is the line coming from Forest Beach heading to Bobby's? I'm a little confused.
Sure. The water folks, like Tom Temple, they like to connect water mains whenever possible. And there's a 2-inch main in Bobby's right now. And so the proposal here would be to add a water main from Forest Beach around the property and then tying into Bobby's. That decreases the need to flush out the lines. And it keeps the water flowing around the loop.
Okay.
Water would have to be provided to the new lot, and this was the agreed upon means.
So the water is coming from Forest Beach, basically.
But the water line that will serve Lot 6 continues south and connects to an existing town water line by Pierce Path, true? So there's no dead end? There's no dead end to the water line?
Not for this one. The town's water line still continues down Judy's Lane, and those folks have to deal with that. But this will be a looped water main, which is, again, the goal of most water commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Questions, comments, Board of Health members?
Is there going to be any
Is your button on?
separation? Oh, sorry. Any separation from the existing two properties to the back of Judy's Lane? And they're going to have some control to have one-way traffic?
I don't know. Thad, can you answer that?
Well, to start off, the east side of that property is on a great big hill. So the low point down there in Bobby's Lane is around elevation 14. The high point on the property is 41. And it's relatively flat across the west half of the property. So when they come in from Forest Beach, and then they come around and develop the property, they're not going to go too far down that hill. That would be a difficult construction. So there's going to be a buffer with that east side, just because it's not advantageous to build down there. As far as the traffic coming in and out over that easement, there will be 3 houses on it, and it will be rare for 2 cars to be going each direction. I myself live on a road with 7 houses, and I can think of once in the past 17 years when I've had 2 cars pass each other. I think that was your question.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Can I get a motion to approve?
Mrs. Noble, a motion to approve the subdivision at 79 Forest Beach.
Can I have a second? Second. Got a Ron, second from Ron. If there's no further questions or comments, anybody from the public wish to comment before the board votes? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any negative votes? I don't hear any, so the motion carries unanimously. You're good to go, Thad.
Thank you much. Have a great afternoon.
You too. All right, we're on to item 4 on the agenda, which is an update and a discussion regarding the Chatham water quality. Dr. Duncanson?
Sure. So to give you a quick update on where we stand, when we're talking water quality, I'm assuming we're talking the PFAS situation. Hopefully, everybody on the board got a copy of the letter that was sent out, or the press release that went out on Friday. We got test results back in Friday morning for another set of samples that were taken out of well number 8. There were 4 samples in total taken, 2 out of the raw water and 2 out of the treated water. 3 out of the 4 came back over 20 parts per trillion. 20 parts per trillion is the maximum contaminant level set by the state. Now, these levels were only slightly, and I emphasize the word slightly, one was 20.1, one was 20.2, and one was 20.5. And the fourth one, if I recollect right, was like 19.7. So they were just barely above 20. When the Water Division got that information, they immediately shut well 8 down. They notified me, they sent me the test results. I had some conversations with the town administration, and it was all ultimately decided that we would go ahead and keep well 8 offline. In between, the Water Division had some conversation with Mass DEP, and Mass DEP said, well, you're not actually in violation of the PFAS regulation. because they use the average during a quarter to determine whether or not a well is above the MCL of 20. So for the period that we're talking about, July, August, and September, based on the samples that have been taken from well number 8, the average of that 3-month period was only 16.7. So from a regulatory point of view, well number 8 was okay to continue to use. However, after discussions with the town manager and the chair of the Board of Selectmen and my recommendation, we kept well 8 offline more for the public concern that there has been over PFAS. And as you know, well, some of you may recall back in the 90s when we had well number 4, the Indian Hill well, which is just outside here, and we had PCE in that well. It was below the MCL at the time, but there was a lot of concern in the community about knowingly putting water into the distribution system with any levels of contaminant. So we felt we were in the same somewhat similar situation with well number 8 and the PFAS, and that led to the determination of keeping the well offline. So well number 8 has been offline since Friday. It remains off at this point. As you recall, well number 5 was taken offline back in April. Both of those wells are up at the training field site. They're both together, horizontally, they're about 100, 150 yards apart. Well number 5 is shallower than well number 8 is, and I suspect that what may be happening, and this is just my thought based on what I've seen, with well number 5 being off, well number 8 being pumping, even though we're in a drought, even though we've had a lot of rain, we're still in a drought situation. I suspect that whatever we saw in well number 5 first has now been drawn down deep enough into the water in that area that we're now picking it up in well number 8. So those 2 wells are offline, and for right now will remain offline. As part of the press release that went out Friday, we did remind everyone in Chatham to continue to abide by the water restrictions that were put in place, made voluntary first, and they made mandatory last May in terms of when you could water and how much you could water and those kinds of things. We did have some discussions about making them even stricter, but that's going to be discussed with the Water and Sewer Commissioners tomorrow night at their meeting at 5:30 as to whether or not they want to go stricter on the water restrictions. One of the ideas that was bandied around was to ban all outdoor watering. That was one option. Another option was to go ahead. Right now, you could basically water 3 days a week and reduce that down to 2 days a week with no watering at all on Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. So those will be discussed tomorrow night with the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not they feel it necessary to go ahead and make the water conservation measures even stricter than they have been. I did send out some information on Friday. We saw a very, very minor uptick in the groundwater levels as a result of, I think, predominantly the last storm that we had, where we recorded over almost 5.5 inches of rain at the airport across the street. The rain gauge we have right outside the building, we did record 5.5 inches. At the airport, it was 5.37. So it was a fairly significant amount of rain, and it fell in about a 5-hour period, as opposed to the previous storm where everything was west of us. This storm, Chatham and Brewster, Dennis, Orleans, Harwich, we got the brunt of the heavy rain. So we did see this minuscule uptick in the groundwater levels. Honestly, I had to shorten the time period on the figure to be able to even notice it, because if you remember, in the past when I've sent out those figures, it's been like January 1st of 2019 through the current time, so you can see the trend over the last couple of years. In order to see that little uptick, I actually had to shrink it down to, I think, August and September of this year. But we did see that little uptick. That's the first time we've seen an uptick during this time period in almost 3 years. So that was good news, but clearly not enough rain to get us out of the drought. So we are currently waiting. I'm hoping maybe today, if not tomorrow, we should get proposals. We talked to another firm last week about proposals to do some PFAS typing, basically fingerprinting the PFAS to see if they can conclusively identify the source. So we have one proposal in from the engineers that currently work for us, Weston and Sampson, on our water system, to do some, source tracking or source determination, if you will. And we're waiting for two other proposals, which should be in, like I say, either today or tomorrow, to track it as well as potentially fingerprint it. So that's where we currently stand with two wells offline. Luckily, we're into the fall with demand dropping off. And we just keep our fingers crossed that we don't lose another well to, a pump failure or some other mechanism at this point. They are continuing to move on well number 4, which is the one right out here that I said has been offline since 1990s. That one is being brought back online. They're basically putting all the infrastructure in place to bring in pH control as well as corrosion control, because that well had none of that. So that's in the works. Unfortunately, it's taken longer than I think any of us would have hoped. We hoped to have it online back in the middle of August. We're now looking at probably everything should be ready by next week. Then it will have to go through a DEP approval process, which, hopefully doesn't take more than a week or so. So the expectation is we'd be able to bring well number 4 back online, sometime late September, the beginning of October, after the Board of Selectmen, or as Water and Sewer Commissioners, have reviewed it and have given it their approval as well. So we need DEP approval and also Board of Selectmen approval to bring that one back online. And that would help to make up, what we've lost with well number 5 and well number 8. Because well number 4 is one of those, million-gallon-a-day wells. The other two are less than that. So it will be capable of making up for the two that are offline. The concern is well number 4, we did have some PFAS hits in it. They were extremely low, but obviously the concern is when we bring that well, not if, when we bring that well online, and we start pulling it on a regular basis, will we be pulling PFAS in, just like we did in 5 and 8? So that remains to be seen. DEP has already indicated that there will be fairly stringent testing requirements for PFAS when we bring that well back online. And frankly, we may do it even more than what DEP requires, just to make sure we're not seeing a problem. So that's where we're at, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just a comment, Bob. I'm impressed that they have the technological ability to fingerprint PFAS at that dilute.
Yeah, one of
level.
the companies we've talked to that has done it quite a bit, they are a little concerned because the levels are so low, just how, not accurate, but how informative it will be, because they're used to dealing with levels, hundreds, thousands parts per trillion, as opposed to where we are at, less than 10 or 20-ish. So, we're going to try it and see what we can learn. Whether or not it will be absolutely definitive or not, time will tell.
Okay. Good. Go ahead, Dick.
Well, for years, Chatham has been walking a fine line in terms of adequate pumping and storage capacity to serve the needs of the expected summer population. And now we're in big trouble, in terms of having to shut down 1 or 2 wells and having to put mandatory water restrictions and even forbid all outdoor watering. And it seems to me that it's time for the town to drill additional wells and to not drill those wells right next to other wells, where if there's a contamination in an area, it's going to affect the new well as well. And I don't know whether the Board of Health can advise the Water and Sewer Department to go out and drill 2 more wells, or order them to drill 2 more wells, but it seems ridiculous to me that a town with the resources of Chatham, the income, that we don't spend the money to have enough well capacity that we don't have to shut everything down when a well goes offline. And we know the population is going to continue to increase in Chatham. And when we sewer things, now we can start building houses on 6,000 square foot lots or 10,000 square foot lots. People are going to be coming in and we may be able to deal with the waste, but we need to have adequate water. And, it just seems absurd that something happens and 2 wells shut down and we're in a situation where we may not have adequate water and alarms are going off in the towers. And it's for a town with our resources, there should be a way to deal with this.
John, can I?
Bob?
Yeah, I'll give you guys the same, I'll just call it an update that I gave to the Board of Selectmen last week when this issue was raised. And I know some of you are new to the board, some of you have been around a while and may remember this, but back in the 1990s, when we had the issue with the Indian Hill well, the town embarked on a study to look at the entire community geographically and look at other potential drinking water well locations. That study was done. I want to say we identified 6 or 7 locations in town that were promising to put new public water supply wells in. Test wells were driven, water samples were taken, tests were done for the water quantity as well, because, a well, it's not only water quality, but it's also water quantity. And the upstart or the final conclusion of that study was the 2 wells that we refer to as wells 10 and 11, which are up in the northwest corner of Chatham, just south of Mill Pond, on a piece of property that the town owns up in that area. Some of the other well sites that we looked at, there were well sites at Goose Pond and a couple other locations. They had adequate volume, but they had issues kind of right out of the gate. They weren't PFAS, they weren't PC, they were primarily iron and manganese. They already had high levels of iron and manganese, meaning, right out of the gate, they would have required treatment facilities, where wells 10 and 11 didn't. So the town moved forward with wells 10 and 11. The well casings were put in and have been in now since the 1990s. Prolonged pump tests were undertaken, and one of the things that came up was there was a detection of MTBE, which, as you all probably remember, is a gasoline additive. So it was detected in very low levels in wells 10 and 11. So basically, we took a step back. We had adequate well supply with the wells in South Chatham, with the wells in the town forest, with wells 5 and 8. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of, we are limited in the amount of water that we can pump out of the ground by the state's Water Management Act. All right, we can't as a community just pump whatever we want. The state has actually set limits on every municipality across the Commonwealth under the Water Management Act in terms of how much water that you can pump out of the ground every year. All right, rightly or wrongly, and believe me, there's a lot in the water industry that don't necessarily agree with the way it's been determined how much you can pump, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, we felt that the town felt there was adequate water volume with the wells we had. So wells 10 and 11 had been kind of sitting there. So now, once the PFAS was detected, there has been a concerted effort to re-look at wells 10 and 11 and what it will take to get those 2 wells online. And that will be the subject of the special town meeting that is coming up in October. That special town meeting is being called specifically to address the water supply issue, to do 2 things. One, to provide funding to basically finish wells 10 and 11 and get them online. And as I said, the only thing that's there right now are the well casings. There's no pumps, there's no piping, there's no well house, there's no treatment facilities, all that has to be built. In addition to that, we'd be looking for funding to bring treatment to wells 5 and 8, because they were getting to the level of needing iron and manganese treatment anyway. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, we built a new water treatment plant down in the town forest to deal with iron and manganese from wells 6, 7, and 9. And the iron and manganese, it's naturally occurring. It comes from the bedrock under our feet. But, over time, the more you pump, the more of the water you draw from close to the bedrock, and you start to get those elevated levels. So it's not a contaminant per se, but it is regulated under the state and the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, so we have to deal with it. But it's naturally occurring, if you will. So those will be the two articles at town meeting, to get wells 10 and 11 finished and online and put the appropriate treatment for wells 5 and 8. Now, as part of the appropriate treatment for wells 5 and 8, they're designing specifically for iron and manganese, but they're also going to make sure the building and all the infrastructure is appropriate if we have to add PFAS treatment. And we're also looking at, just to make it even more complicated, we're looking at adding well 4 into that. So in other words, we have one plant in the town forest that deals with wells 6, 7, and 9. We're looking at, rather than building a separate facility for wells 5 and 8 and a separate facility for well 4, we're looking to see if we can't combine that into one building. So basically have one building, pipe all 3 of those wells together, and then treat them in one facility, just to save having to build multiple facilities. So that is all in the works. Now, that doesn't mean the town could not look at some of the other sites that were identified for even further capacity. Nice thing is wells 10 and 11 are both about million-gallon-a-day wells. So they both have a lot of capacity. And they share protected watershed with Harwich on their side of the line, so the area around the wells is well protected. But that doesn't mean, that we may not need to start looking at some of the other sites that were identified. Now, Chatham's not that big an area geographically. And the problem that we have, because as you know, we're surrounded on 3 sides by water, by seawater, we're really restricted to putting public water supply wells inside of Route 28. Because if you go outside of Route 28 in areas of Chatham, you get too close to the marine environment, there's too much chance at high pumping volumes, you'd start to draw seawater into the wells. So we're really limited to that kind of interior within the Route 28 area. And we've already cited a fair number of wells in that area. I think I've shared our Water Resource Protection District map with the board previously, and if not, I can send it out again. And a significant portion of that area is already in the Water Resource Protection District, and that is based on the Zone 2s of each of the individual wells that we already have. So when we add wells 10 and 11, that area is actually even going to get slightly bigger, although a lot of that area is already covered by other wells. So there isn't a whole lot of real estate left in Chatham to site more public water supply wells. That's one of the reasons why the last number of years we've had the voluntary water conservation measures pretty much every year to get people to understand that water isn't, and I've said this before, according to USGS, we're only using, and when I say we, the entire Cape Cod, we only use about 5% of the water that's underneath Cape Cod on a Cape-wide basis. But just because of that doesn't mean you go ahead and use it willy-nilly. You have to use it responsibly because, the expense is pumping it out of the ground, treating it to whatever extent you need to, and then it's ridiculous to then put it on your lawn because you're paying all that effort, to make drinkable water that then you use for lawn irrigation, which is why I've been a strong proponent for years of getting people off the public water supply system if they want to irrigate, put in a private well and do it that way, because then you're not paying all that additional, or the municipality through The taxpayers are not paying all that money to treat the water, pump the water, treat it, and then, put it right back on the lawn. It just makes no sense. So anyway, long-winded answer to your question.
So if we ran up against the state mandated maximum pumping capacity, then do we put a moratorium on building or hooking up or prevent new buildings from hooking up to the water supply? Have towns had to approach it that way?
That could be one possibility. There are others. You can petition the state to increase the amount of the allocation, and a number of towns, including Chatham, have done that. Because as I said, when the state first came out with their allocations under the Water Management Act, a lot of the water purveyors on the Cape had a little bit of heartache because the state wasn't necessarily taking into account the worst-case summer period when, the Cape's population goes from 50,000 to 250,000, for 3-4 months. The state's backed off a little bit, and they've made some revisions in terms of how they calculate that, so it's a little better. But yeah, ultimately, if it became that bad, conceivably, you could look at some kind of a moratorium on new hookups. I mean, we're nowhere near that yet, but conceivably, that could be an outcome.
Questions, follow-up questions, comments?
Yeah, just a quick, what's the ballpark percentage decrease of town water use in the off-season? Is there kind of a sense of what that is? Must be.
Like, how much does the peak flow of the summer drop?
I can
for the
tell you
fall?
this August was down about 14% from last August. I can get that number for you on a yearly.
So is it like half or?
It's not half.
Two-thirds?
No. It's a fairly significant number once all those irrigation systems get shut off.
Yeah.
But, a lot of them are also year-round houses. It's not strictly the summer population, so,
Okay, thank you.
but, yeah.
This was a good discussion. Dick raised a good question, and I think Bob gave a very thorough explanation as to where the town is now in terms of contingency planning. Judy?
We have someone from the audience who'd like to ask a question. Gloria?
Gloria, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this discussion today, and thanks to Dr. Duncanson as well. As you know, I'm Gloria Freeman, and I have asked that the board have an agenda item on potable water quality at each of its meetings because of the importance of this issue to all of Chatham. Citizens are quite interested in this issue because any threats to our drinking water can have severe impacts on our health and also on our economy. You, Mr. Chairman, told me that you would vote on this request just as the select board has. They did vote, and they do have this agenda item at each of their meetings. I hope that you and your board will vote to do that until we know what is causing expansion of contamination, such as it has to well 8, which has had to be shut down. Of course, if there's nothing to discuss, you tell us that, which in itself would be informative. Excuse me. If I may, I'm hoping that Dr. Duncanson can give us a timeline for when wells 10 and 11 might be fully operational if funding is approved at the special town meeting to be held next month, as well as approximately when wells 5 and 8 will be retrofitted with iron, manganese, and PFAS removal equipment if needed. Finally, I understand that the water commissioners are directly responsible for water quality, but this board also has authority. You don't have to wait for the select board to invite you to participate in this discussion. I would like to point out that to my knowledge, the select board members have not met as the Water and Sewer Commission to discuss water issues. As you know, they wear two hats and usually differentiate when they are acting as the select board and when they are acting as water commissioners. Okay, that's it, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually had, we're getting feedback on this, Mike. That's better. Okay. I actually had talked with Judy earlier tonight about the fact that I wanted to raise that question that Gloria Freeman had recommended regarding whether or not this board wishes to have a standing agenda item on water supply, or conversely, whether we wanted to simply continue to have it added to the agenda when when Bob and Judy thought it was appropriate and there was something important to bring forward to us. So, with those as the choices, do Board of Health members have a preference on how we handle the ongoing agenda question?
Well, I think we should get an update at each Board of Health meeting. If there's
Okay.
nothing to report, then you can just say.
For the foreseeable future then, because, I mean, clearly, these issues are front and center now, and I think naturally, over the next few months, we're going to have timely reports to consider. But, Ron, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think we owe it to the townspeople to keep them impressed, up to date now.
Okay.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't have the knowledge and have the doorway, we can call Bob and talk to him about anything. They don't have that, like we do. So I think it's fair that we let them know what's going on. If there's nothing, there's nothing.
Other board members? Adam, I'm hearing a nod from you. Noble?
I think for, during this crisis period, having it as an agenda item every week, and Bob or. I think having it as an agenda item for the near future, where it's on the agenda, then Bob or Judy can give us a quick update, and if there's nothing to say, they can say it. Sounds reasonable. I wouldn't be for permanent, like forever, agenda item, because that could be kind of problematic for us. But I think in the near future, during this period of time, yes.
Ed, comment? Dick, comment.
Yeah, I think that given what's going on right now in the town, it would be helpful to have two separate groups looking at this issue, sort of potentially counterbalancing one another, and it would reassure the population. And then we can always remove that agenda item when it's no longer needed.
Okay, so what I'm hearing as a consensus from the Board of Health members right now is that we are generally supportive of having the water quality update agenda item on all upcoming meetings until further notice. And if we get to a point in time where there's not a lot to update us, to discuss and review, and maybe we back off at that time. But do we need to vote on this, or just?
I don't think you need to vote on it.
I would just based upon this discussion, it's clear that the Board of Health is interested in having monthly,
We'll make sure that it gets on the agenda.
meeting updates as a part of every standard Board of Health meeting moving into the future. Okay, thank you.
Can I just let the board
Judy?
know that at our last meeting, we discussed hazardous waste issues in some of our commercial industrial areas and a concern about inspections and such. I did want to let you know that I had a good discussion with the Barnstable County Hazardous Waste Specialist, who's in charge of enforcement of hazardous waste use and storage and inspections on Cape Cod. She works very closely with the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, our local fire department, and she's very familiar with any of our generators or users of hazardous materials. She gave me a really good update, so I did ask her to come to a Board of Health meeting. I'm going to have her in, not at the next meeting, but our October 4th meeting. She'll probably do it remotely, and she'll give us a presentation, and she'll explain the state and the federal regulations and what her job is, and who, she may give us some information on who some of the people are in town. There's a threshold of amount used that they have to meet requirements for EPA and DPH reporting. So that will be at our October 4th meeting.
That'll be very useful
Yeah, I think it
for
will
us
be. It
to
was
get a
good-
sense of that.
Yeah, I think so.
Any other questions or comments? Are we done, Bob, with your update?
Well, just quickly on the comments about timeline. Sorry. Just quickly on the question about timelines, I think probably we're talking 18 months to 2 years for both wells 10 and 11 and 5 and 8. You know, from the time the money gets appropriated, just the construction involved in both locations, you know, basically we're starting from scratch, if you will. And given how long it took to build the water treatment plant and you know, the town forest, that's where I'm thinking 18 to 24 months. You know, we're definitely experiencing slowdowns in a lot of equipment and all because of the COVID issue. You know, some things are hard to get. That's one of the things that's been holding up getting well number 4 online, is just getting some of the equipment and materials. You know, suppliers are backed up, so hopefully that doesn't continue too much longer and we can get these things expedited. But I think, you know, probably 18 to 24 months is realistic, and hopefully it's a lot sooner than that.
All right, thank you. Noble.
It was mentioned that the Board of Selectmen had to meet separately as a sewer commission in order to deal with these problems, or water and sewer. Is that true, that they can't deal with it during their regular weekly meetings?
No, they can't deal with it as the Board of Selectmen, but there are some issues and topics that they do take over their role as water and sewer commissioners, like things like the regulations and things like that. They would have to switch from selectmen to water and sewer commissioners, and they just do it quickly by vote during the meeting.
At that meeting?
Yeah, they don't need to call a special meeting or anything like that. It can be folded into their regular select board meeting, and every once in a while you'll see an agenda item and it'll say, you know, board is meeting as the water and sewer commissioners. But, yeah.
Ron?
Yeah, Bob, I had one other question that I had. When you were talking about the PFAS, you talked about the fingerprint. What will they see in that fingerprint?
What they look for is some different types of compounds, like the firefighting foam that everybody, you know, jumps on immediately is, oh, that must be the source because we have an airport and all. The fingerprint or the types of PFAS that's in firefighting foam is generally a certain grouping. And so you look for that specific grouping, and if you find it, chances are it's from firefighting foam. Sometimes they can even tell to the point of who manufactured it, because different manufacturers have different ratios of the individual PFAS components. And so if you can break it down far enough and get a detailed analysis, you can sometimes pinpoint it all the way back to, okay, this was manufactured by XYZ Corp., you know. But that's what they do. And you know, a couple of weeks ago when the Silent Spring person was talking to the Friends of Chatham Waterways meeting, I had shared some of our initial data with her, and she took a look at it and she said, well, based on this breakdown that I'm seeing in your analytical results, it kind of mirrors firefighting foam. But she couldn't say conclusively because it was just one little sample and, you know, very low amounts. But that's basically what they do. They can break it down into its chemical constituents, and if they can get it detailed enough, they can actually.
So they could trace it back from the
So
source.
they could potentially trace it back. And we're talking with 2 firms that have that capability right now about their ability to do that. Like I say, one of them has indicated it may be tough just because our levels are so low that it may be masked by all the other sources.
Thank you.
But we're going to try it.
Good, thank you.
All right, we ready for the next agenda item? All right, Bob, you're on item number 5, COVID-19.
Yep, I know you're Oops, quickly, because I know you're up against the 4:30 deadline. We currently have 379 cases, confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Chatham. We have 18 cases so far in September, and that is versus a total of 8 cases in September in 2020. So we're currently, that was for the 8 cases for the entire month of September last year. We're only to the 13th of the month, so not even quite halfway through, and we're already at 18 cases. Of those 18 cases, 9 have been in vaccinated individuals.
Really?
2 have been in individuals we know were not vaccinated, and 7 we just don't know. A lot of these were, well, not a lot, about half these cases were just over the weekend, so there hasn't necessarily been the follow-up yet with VNA or others to get data into the system that, they haven't necessarily had a chance to talk to people because the state system was actually down for part of the weekend for updating and maintenance. So they're scrambling, today and tomorrow to contact all these people and follow up with them. So we may get a better breakdown, as time goes on. We may learn some more when the people call back and
So Bob, can the 9 that
Yep.
were reportedly vaccinated, were they tested for a purpose? I mean, for a reason, because they had symptoms?
Yeah,
or were they
generally
just
because they had symptoms.
Okay.
Yep, they had symptoms that mirrored COVID-19, so they went and got tested.
Okay,
Yep,
thank
yep.
you.
In most of the cases, and in fact, I think in all of the cases, the symptoms were mild. Runny nose, headache, things like that. Didn't result in their being hospitalized, didn't result in any deaths, but, and it's difficult this time of the year because we're starting to see flu, allergy season, the ragweed season is just going crazy. But they had symptoms that kind of mirrored what COVID-19 would be, so they went and got tested.
Is there an assumption that in all those 9 cases, they would be infectious themselves?
Well, the latest, the data that we're seeing out of CDC and all says, yes, even vaccinated people can be infectious for a period of time.
Okay.
And that's why even vaccinated people that test positive are still recommended to quarantine for, 10 days or so. Yeah.
Interesting.
The other thing is our 14-day % positivity rate, and remember this is as of last Thursday for the 2 weeks prior, was down to 3.94, which, had dropped from the previous week when we were up about 4.7. So that is good news. However, the bad news, the downside of that is we were the 4th highest on the Cape. If you remember back in August, I was reporting that Chatham had the lowest % positivity rate on the Cape. We're now the 4th highest. We're down from what we were the previous week, but it's still up there. The Barnstable County was 3.76, so we were slightly above that, and the statewide 14-day positivity rate was 2.51. So, we weren't twice what the state average is, but, we were up there significantly. And then the average daily incident rate in Chatham has also dropped a little bit, which is good news, and I will update the figures that I send out on a regular basis. So that's good news. That mirrors the drop in the positivity rate. Now, how much of this may be because, the visitors and all, and when we get to that middle to the latter part of August, that starts dropping off. So we potentially would expect to see less cases among Chatham residents because there's less people for them potentially to be exposed to. So that's kind of a quick update on the numbers. Just a couple other things I wanted to touch base on quickly. There's been a lot of discussion about booster shots. Just so people understand, booster shots, all right, have not yet been approved. And I don't expect we'll see that for at least another couple of weeks. However, there is something that is going on, 3rd doses, okay? 3rd doses are shots specifically targeted towards certain individuals who have immunocompromised systems. Those people can get a, quote, 3rd dose or booster. They're trying to use 3rd dose shots versus booster shots so people understand the difference. So third doses are for immunocompromised people, and if they fit that criteria, and there's a whole list of what classifies you in that category, you can go ahead and get that third dose. Booster shots, which will be more for the general population, those have not yet been approved. And as you know, there's a lot of, well, I won't say a lot, there is controversy about that, whether or not they're absolutely needed, whether or not 5 to 8 months is the right time frame, or should it be longer. And then on a worldwide basis, there's the whole concern about, the wealthier countries giving out third shots when there's a lot of folks in the third world countries that can't even get a shot yet. So that's politics. I'm staying out of it, but that's what's all going on behind the scenes. And then the other thing that I just wanted to touch base on is mask wearing indoors. The state has indicated if you're indoors, you should be wearing a mask. If you're in groups that potentially are more at risk by age, by medical condition, or something like that. CDC has basically said everybody should be wearing a mask indoors, whether vaccinated. Obviously, if you're not vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask indoors. But even vaccinated people should be wearing a mask indoors to help stop the spread of the Delta variant. We have had some discussion about mask wearing in town buildings. We have not mandated it yet. I said I would bring it up for the board's discussion at your meeting as to whether or not you want to think about it, give any recommendation. We're looking primarily at the community center, but also at other town buildings. I had one of my staff do a survey of other towns on the Cape on Friday. There are 3 towns, Mashpee, Nantucket, and Truro, that are requiring masks in indoor settings in all town buildings. A couple of other towns, Yarmouth, Wellfleet, Orleans, and Brewster, advise people to wear masks, but do not make it mandatory in town buildings. And then the rest don't have any requirement, and they're basically just continuing to watch their COVID numbers and all and see how things are going. We don't require masks in our town buildings. You probably saw the sign that we have in the lobby out here that's been up for about a month now, just indicating, people at higher risk and all, and unvaccinated people should wear them. I haven't made a recommendation to the town manager that we go with mandatory masking in town buildings. And now that we're starting to see the percent positivity and all drop off a little bit, to me, that kind of takes a little bit of the urgency out of it. I was a little concerned, a week or 2 weeks ago when the numbers were going up. I'm still concerned because we do see an uptick in cases among people, but at least the positivity rates are starting to go back in the right direction. Even though that data is 2 weeks old, but I think that's just a reflection that it takes things time to catch up. So, anyway, that's all I have on COVID today.
Dick?
Have we had any positive cases in the schools yet?
I am not aware of any. We haven't heard of any. We have pretty good communications with the schools, so I think if we
Just
did,
started
we'd
Monday,
know about
though.
it.
Last Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, but-
I do meet fairly regularly with the school nurses, and I have not heard of any cases yet. So
Yeah.
as you said, it's only been
Around
a
the
week.
country,
Yeah.
within a couple
Yeah.
of weeks of
I mean,
opening
it's,
schools,
it's
they were
inevitable.
closing schools, and, with the Delta being very transmissible
And them not being
Children
vaccinated,
getting
the
sick.
younger ones.
that's an issue. And now, if we compare the total number of positive cases in Chatham this August to last August, how does that compare?
It was 8 last August, August was 24. We had 24 cases this August, and we had, where's my number? Last August, we had 4 cases.
Yeah, so it's these numbers that sort of make me take pause, that at a time when we're having 6 times as many cases as we had a year ago when we were instituting mask mandates willy-nilly. Now we're saying you don't need mask mandates anymore because ostensibly vaccinated people are safe, but they're not. Half of the cases are in vaccinated people, and vaccinated people are getting symptomatic, and they're passing it to other people. So it just seems kind of bizarre to me that we're not interested in instituting mask mandates when things are really worse this year than they were last year. But, I mean, it's a lot of it is politics and public, you know,
Well, I think,
public concern.
I think the board has got to keep our focus on that policy question, very much so. I know it's on my mind. What would it take for me to personally say, you know, it's time? So I like the fact that we're having this discussion, because we may, at some point in the near future, decide that it is time to mandate mask wearing in indoor places throughout town.
And we thought we were safe in the summer, you know, because we're outdoors, and people think you're protected when you're outdoors, and you may or may not be. But now everybody's going to be moving indoors. And so just as last year, I expect that November, you know, it's going to be a bad month.
So I think we need to keep an eye on the trend lines and listen to Bob. And maybe we need to, as a board, really keep those data lines and those reports you send us front and center in our minds. We have to close this meeting in 5 minutes.
Give or take.
Can we defer this?
We
Or do
can.
we want to do it?
Yeah, we can defer it. The
Board
last
of
item?
Health reorganization?
Well, sure. I mean, we still have a few more minutes, I think.
We
We can defer the reading of the minutes as,
We can
No,
do the
we've got-
minutes next week, too.
yeah, yeah. But
All right,
could
do we
the-
you want to talk about the reorganization? It's just important that every now and then, every board consider where they are with their leadership and whether they want to make a change or modification or what have you. And I agreed with Judy to put this on. I'm willing to serve as the board chairman into the, you know, foreseeable future on a continuing basis, but in my opinion, I would like to see Dr. Noble Hansen moved up to being the vice chair. Because when the time comes for me to step down, I think Dr. Hansen would be a perfect future chairman. So that was my hope tonight, that we would get a motion to appoint Dr. Hansen and a vote to move, and an affirmative vote for myself as well.
I'll make a motion to have Noble be the vice chair and you continue as the chair.
Okay. Do we get a second on that? Second. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Who
Okay.
seconded that?
I think Ed
did?
seconded it. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that vote of approval. Now, Ron, you had a lingering question. Are you okay skipping that?
Yeah, I'll just say what it is, you can answer it next time. Is there any talk in the town about making like making the police, the fire, school department personnel get vaccinated? Has that been discussed?
No, there's been no, well, I shouldn't say there's been no, but no, there's no thought at the moment of making it mandatory for town employees.
Okay, thank you.
Just leave the thing on, you know? All right. Do you want to do the minutes? Do we have 3 minutes to do the minutes? Okay, we have minutes for August 16th, 2021 to accept. Everybody had a copy of them in their packet. Are there any edits or comments or corrections anybody would like to make? If not, can I have a motion to accept the minutes of August 16th? We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Carol, second. All in favor of accepting the minutes of August 16th, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is approved. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Ed, second. Carol. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone.